Get ready, get ready, get ready. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm DJ Dan Nail, Soulful House Nation, and this segment is called Soulful House Nation, Our Community. And the reason we do this show, in addition to the music show, because we know in the Soulful House community, if we keep it real, there's more going on than just music. So, what I like to do periodically is to bring on someone to speak about an issue that happens in our community. Today, I want to talk about mental health. And as you know, that's in the news in a very big way. In addition to that, I also want to have that conversation in relation to addiction and how the two may go hand in hand. Now, what I've done is I brought in a special speaker, special guest, Mr. Marvin Bell. He is the Assistant Program Director at Newark Renaissance House. And I'm going to leave it right there. I'm going to shut it off right there. And I'm going to start with getting you introduced. So you can take it from there and just tell us a little bit about you.
Okay. I am the director at a adolescent residential program. And I'm also the CEO of my own company, which is First Step Clinical Services. I've been in the field about 19 years. I've dealt with addiction, mental health, couples therapy, sex therapy, sex offenders, and I've decided that the mental health challenges are going to be a very good discussion for us today. So my plan is to do that.
Okay. Now, tell us about your organization and/or the name of your company one more time, just so we get all that in play, and then some of your credentials.
Okay. First Step Clinical Services is a program that I'm opening for myself, and I actually work presently at a adolescent residential program where the youth come to the program and stay overnight. They don't go home after they come. They stay with us from 4 to 6 months. I'm a licensed associate counselor. I have an LCADC as a counselor of drug and alcohol. I'm a certified clinical supervisor, and I'm also an anger resolution therapist. I deal with anger and the de-escalation of anger.
Okay. Now, as far as your organization, what's the mission of it, that the one that you work for today, and I guess
They almost go hand in hand.
Okay.
It's about helping people who are caught in the grip of addiction, and also people who are struggling with some kind of mental health illness, whether it be something that's biological, something that's situational, something that deals with medication, or just regular talk therapy.
Now, here's what I want to do. Let's talk about mental health. First of all, let's just get a little baseline for what mental health is or means.
Okay. I kind of got it in my head, something that I read cleared it up really good for me. It said, a mental health disorder can be described as someone who is inappropriately processing information. So where we think that everybody understands to cross on the red, or where we think everybody understands to not cut themselves, or we think that everyone knows the basic moral right and wrong, a person with some kind of mental challenge doesn't have that same ability. And that's where we kind of lose control of the idea, because we have to be careful believing that everyone is the same. So mental health is a problem appropriately processing information. And it can go in a lot of different directions, but that's the core of it. That they're not hearing what you're hearing and processing it the way you think they should, or I think they should.
Now, let's do this. Who suffers from mental health? I mean, is there a particular category of people? Is there a particular audience? Like, who does mental health issues affect?
Well, the parameters are mild, moderate, and severe. We all deal with daily stress. We all deal with daily challenges. So the mental aspect of it is, how do you adapt? It's more about adaptation than it is about a field or a category or a population. We all have the same stresses. Like, let's say we lose a loved one, and everybody's understanding of that loss can be different. Everybody's understanding, like I said earlier, to process that information appropriately will allow you to understand that whoever that loved one was, they've passed on, and things are going to be different without. Someone who has a mental challenge may hear the same information, take it totally to heart, and struggle with letting go of that person being gone. So it doesn't really fit into a category where you could say this person, this group, this people. We all have the same stresses. It's about how you process information that you hear.
But then that sounds like, too, that you could be okay today and tomorrow you'd be in a whole different world. Is that possible?
Yes, it is. When you deal with they have a book called the DSM-5, which is a diagnostic statistical manual that kind of tries to categorize the disorders for you. And that book kind of says it this way. It says there are things that are mentally challenging for children, for teens, and adults. So there are some things that have early onset. They start when you're young. And then there are some things that they don't come on until you're older. So that has to be put into the equation as well, where you are in the different stages of life. Because I'll give you an example. They have a term, a disorder called conduct disorder. Conduct disorder is usually saved for children. Their behavior in school, the way they act, and the way they perform in interpersonal things with other people. A conduct disorder, in time, can change into antisocial disorder, which is usually for adults. So you wouldn't give a child the diagnosis of antisocial.
Okay.
You'd give the child conduct because he's behaving wrong. So you have to take into account that there are some things that are for the children, there are some things that happen in the teens, and there are some things that happen in adults.
Okay, interesting. I never looked at it that way, never thought about it that way.
Well, even with children, let's do it again. Identification, gender identification, whether I'm a boy or a girl. Where normal people think that's an easy choice.
Right.
But someone who is having some kind of mental disorder, as they're navigating who I am, that could cause them a problem, or it would cause another person a problem.
So it's not who they really are, it's processing that.
It's processing that. And that's the challenge, to understand that processing is what it's all about. And some people do it differently. Everybody doesn't process the loss of a loved one. Everybody doesn't process my identity. Everybody doesn't process my mother cursed at me, my father cursed at me. I actually had a situation recently where I made a statement to another clinician that she told me when she was talking to one of our clients, he began crying over being complimented.
Okay.
Now here it is, he's being complimented, which we would think is a good thing. He breaks out in tears. But what I shared with the other clinician was that this particular person processes things so intensely that a compliment takes him way up, and a put down or a derogatory statement takes him way down. So he doesn't have the ability to process anything mildly. Everything is intense.
Okay.
He goes to extreme with anything you give him, and that's another one of those mental health challenges.
Then okay. How can you tell if someone is having, say, mental health issues, even if it's you? Because look at this. It seems like to me, when I was younger, and I'm not that old, just want to clear it up right now.
Yes.
Young Dan. Smile.
Forever young.
Forever young. Okay. You know, it seemed like when people had issues with mental health, it looked like you could tell by looking at them. Now you can't tell. What's going on here? Or what do we need to be paying attention to that says, hey, wait a minute, something's not right here, if they don't look a certain way? What?
Well, once again, I'm going to give you the concept of moderate, mild, severe.
Okay.
What you were seeing was severe. So you saw severe and you said, oh, that's insanity. That's abnormal. You saw it because it was at its severe stages. Now, someone in a milder stage has the same exact diagnosis, but it's in a milder form. That's how you miss it. To be able to say that it never affects anyone the same. It always has different parameters, and it always has to be, it has to be assessed by someone who is able to see it in its mild stages. Most people can glimpse it in its severe stages. Sometimes you can see it in a moderate stage. But one of the things that I was telling you about this manual that the psychiatrists use, it has some criteria that it has to meet. And some of the criteria are, it has to happen or have happened at least for 6 months or longer.
Okay.
Then another one of the criteria is that it has to happen over the course of things. It can't just happen at home. It has to happen at school, it has to happen at work, it has to happen in relationships with others. It can't just be one, like siblings.
Okay.
Like siblings can argue with each other and hate each other and go outside and have fun.
Okay.
Someone with a personality disorder to a degree would hate their sibling, they would hate their teacher, they would hate anyone in authority. It would carry over into other areas of their life. So that's one of the criteria that has to be put into it so that you don't think that just because, I was telling somebody this recently, I'm a little older too now. And
speak for yourself.
Yeah, I'm older too now. And I remember when a kid running in the classroom was just a kid running in the classroom. Now a kid running in the classroom has ADHD.
Okay.
He has some kind of conduct disorder, or he has something wrong with him. Where normally a kid running around the classroom he's a boy. He runs, he jumps, he do. So we've sensitized it as well too, looking for something wrong with everybody and something wrong with everything. We've kind of got hypervigilant on labeling people, so that's important too.
You know, I'm going to come back to that, but I could tell you that when I was younger, which again, only lived not too long ago, the solutions for that kind of running around behavior were different than they were now. See, because back then, like corporal punishment was a way of life.
Okay.
I mean, so, oh, you want to run around the classroom here, huh? I got something for you.
Right.
And you'll stop. And I'm telling you what, it worked. But
it worked. Well, the generation that we're in now, the place in life where we're in now, we're more aware of traumatic things. We're more aware of what cursing your child out at a young age causes. We're more aware now of not having a father around, the issues that causes. We're more aware now of children being adopted and children being placed in foster care. We're more aware of the involvement that diapers plays in the well, you know, they call it now DCP, Division of, I forgot the name of it right now. It's on the tip of my tongue, but it's Child Protection and Services or something like that.
okay.
So with those issues now involved, we kind of listen to the children a little better than we used to.
Okay.
But we're quick to diagnose because sometimes it's easier to do it that way than to use corporal punishment.
Okay.
You know, so we have upgraded our ability to listen to children because now, you know, we understand that trauma can be verbal, it can be physical, it can be emotional, but also we're quick to label that without meeting criteria for 6 months of it.
Okay.
He's 7 years old. Let's not make it a problem yet. You know, he's just having the same. We used to call it terrible twos.
Right.
And we expected him to be agitated and animated. Now terrible twos can be labeled at 2 years old. They can give you some medication to stop him from being
you know, I wish somebody would have told my father that. Anyway, that's another story.
Okay, yeah, that's another story.
Yeah. So what about this? How much of the time is it a behavior change or chemical imbalance? And how can you kind of like figure that out? Or again, that's where you got to get a person like you with a clinical area. How do you figure?
Well, as a part of, you know, like if you deal with a psychiatrist or a psychologist or someone who just has a degree as an LPC, that's a licensed professional counselor, you want to try to be aware of human development. And in the different stages of human development, you look at environmental things that cause these issues. You look at biological things that cause these issues. You look at educational things. And like I told you earlier, you look at trauma. You look at, you know, the family of origin. You look at so many different things to come up with those diagnoses. And it's important that you take your time and make an assessment. When it becomes biological, that's almost a confirmation that it's legitimate when it's biological. If it's situational, like if someone dies, you should be sad. That doesn't mean you're depressed.
Right.
Doesn't mean you're depressed, but you should be sad.
Right.
Now, if the sadness lasts over a certain amount of time, now we have to try to assess for something more than just the loss of the person making you sad. So, biological, it'll kick in and it'll stay there. So that's when you bring in, you know, psychiatrists who try to give some kind of medication to counteract the biologicals. But there are times when, you know, if a person is unhappy about losing a job or breaking up a relationship, that's the common thing. But once again, I talk to you about processing information appropriately processing it. I can take losing my job and think that it's the end of the world if I process it wrong. And react to it by maybe trying to cause myself harm. If I should do that, I had something there all the time. The losing of the job just brought it to surface.
You know, to that point, matter of fact, just recently, there was a disgruntled worker who went in and killed people there. And every year, several times a year, there's a person who lost a job. Maybe they felt it was unfair, or even maybe because of the loss of that job, their life has taken a downturn. And now they want to come for the people who did it, and at that point, they want to kill everybody and die themselves.
Well, remember I talked to you about the person who processes intensity.
Okay.
Everything means the end of the world. They call it catastrophizing. Everything means that the world is coming to an end, I'm never going to be anything. When people start processing that, they have a phrase called cognitive distortions. That means thinking errors. So my loss of my job might be attached to my catastrophizing thinking, where I think, okay, I'm going to lose my job. That means I'm going to lose my house. That means I'm going to be in the street. That means I'm going to be homeless. That means I'm going to fail my family. And if you put all of that together, it might cause you to react to the final piece where you're in the street, homeless, and that maybe not be the case. But I've learned, and I'm starting to do research myself on the idea of processing information inappropriately causes some of these things. Now, once again, if it's biological, you can say this person will always process inappropriately. If it's not, you may be able to help them through talk therapy process better.
Which kind of sort of answers my question, or I kind of go in this direction. You know, how do you treat it, and you know what are the steps? Let's say we decided that, you know what, I have an issue here. Like, what are the steps? Now, I imagine everything's individual, but are there certain steps?
First step is to do a proper assessment. You have to find out if the person meets the criteria for the particular disorder that you may be thinking that they have, whether it be schizophrenia, whether it be depression, anxiety. You have to find out first by doing an assessment to find out if the person really meets criteria. Sometimes people will have features of a disorder. They will present some of the features of someone who has it, but they may not meet the total criteria. So the first thing you have to do is an assessment. Okay, you come to terms that the person does have whatever disorder that you're talking about. Then you would probably refer them to someone, a psychiatrist most of the time, to find out if there's anything that the psychiatrist believes could be a remedy for it. There are amazing drugs out there for people who have these disorders. But once again, the human mind doesn't want to be projected as crazy. So when I don't want to be crazy, I don't want to take anything for my mental. It'll make me say, I'm not crazy, I'm not taking that. That's one of the first struggles that you'll run into trying to treat someone with a medication. That it's a stigma attached to it. And the stigma will say, I'm not crazy, and since I'm not crazy, I'm not going to take it. Some people even take it, fare better, start having some of the symptoms that they had alleviated, and once the symptoms are gone, they don't need it anymore in their mind. So they're concerned that I was hearing these voices, and now I'm not hearing any voices, I'm fine. So it might make them not continue taking it. If it should be biological, they would probably take it for a long time. I don't want to say a lifetime, but if you are biologically or some kind of chemical imbalance in your body, you will probably have to take the medication for a nice amount of time. And I think one of the things that is even overlooked in our field, it's medication plus therapy. It's not you give them the medication and send them home.
Oh, okay.
You have to meet with them and talk with them. How is this making you feel? Some of the medications have side effects.
Okay.
They make you gain weight. Sometimes they take away your sex drive. Sometimes they give you like blurry vision. They give you other thoughts of suicide. They trigger other things in you, and the therapist, whoever prescribed the medication, needs to be made aware of that, so that they can decide if they want to continue it or discontinue it. Because there are a lot of medications that work, but the side effects of it have to be explained and dealt with by listening to the person tell you. If they're getting 20 milligrams and they need 40 milligrams, or if they're getting 40 and they need 60, like, you have to have those conversations.
So let me just kind of say this back to you. So I could be taking matter of fact, when you see these commercials, they say, oh, this will stop your blood pressure. But if you have thoughts of suicide, thoughts of killing somebody, thoughts of jumping off the bridge, thoughts of, then those side effects.
Yeah.
And also too, I'm guessing then that a person could take a medication to handle this imbalance over here, but it can make them feel terrible physically. And they say
that's why the therapy has to be connected to it. Because they can talk through those feelings sometimes and let you understand what it is. So the person that's prescribed the medication can either lower the dose, increase the dose, or take away altogether and try something different. See, one of the medications may cause a side effect that is intolerable. And we almost went through that. We almost went through that with the people with HIV. They were taking the HIV medications and then having side effects that were so bad they was going, well, I'd rather not take this. So mental health medications, the psychotropic medications, have the same potential to give a side effect that is so far away from what the normal symptoms were that maybe you need to discontinue that medication and try something different. because there are, I mean, a really large amount of medications that the psychiatrist has at his disposal.
Okay. Now, what about this? Family, friends, etc. How do they deal or handle it? Because, and the reason I ask that question is because sometimes you find yourself in a situation, or many people have, where there is a family member that has a challenge. And now, how do they normalize their lives? How do they handle these situations, or any suggestions? Do they need to go to therapy too, or what are we talking about here?
You're sliding over back to stigma again.
Okay.
I don't want to tell nobody I got a crazy cousin, so I might avoid him. I don't want to tell nobody I got a crazy husband. I might lie and say he ain't doing what he's doing. So we're talking about stigma first. Second, if you really care and you're going to be involved in this person's life and this person's treatment, you need to educate yourself on whatever it is that they have. You can't know how to treat them when they're having a manic episode or when they're having a depressive episode if you don't know what the disorder looks like at its highest and at its lowest. So I think me and you had this conversation before. It's about you kind of caring enough to educate yourself. I mean, like, we got this big thing called Google. Like, right. Google it. Learn a little bit more about it. Learn a little bit more about it. Don't individualize it and make it your family member or your friend. Look at it as a disorder that affects hundreds and thousands of people, and try to understand how the struggle and the strain that your mate or your friend or your family member is going through by understanding what it is. A lot of people try to deal with someone who is having a mental health issue, especially like anxiety and depression, by just dealing with the person. You need to educate yourself on it. I have parents who come to me and say, well, my kid has ADHD. And I automatically say, what do you know about ADHD? Did you look up anything about ADHD? Because as soon as you look it up, you'll learn some things that you didn't know, that when your child does it, you'll go, oh, that's it right there. That's it right there. You won't be so taken back by it because you'll understand that that's a part of the disorder. And that's what a lot of people do. They try to handle the disorder on their own knowledge, on their own intellect. And it's really challenging to do it that way. You need to, if they can give him a diagnosis, if they can say he has schizophrenia, he has anxiety. Like I'll give you, a friend of mine has anxiety. And when she has anxiety attacks, I know what to do because I'm first the counseling part, but also I know she has a real diagnosis for anxiety. I'll give you another example. I had a friend who grew up with diabetes. He had diabetes his whole life. And he used to always tell me that I had to be aware that his insulin level, his sugar level dropped sometimes. So one day, we were in the car riding, and he's talking to me, and he's talking incoherently. He's reaching, and he's saying things that don't make any sense to where we are right then and there. Because I knew about the diabetes, I was able to make him go to a store, get a piece of candy, give it to him, and everything subsided. Where if I would have tried to figure it out, I would have been looking at him like, what is going on with this guy? Like, he's crazy.
Right.
He's talking about birds and butterflies and stuff, and I'm sitting there saying like, oh my God, like, is he crazy? No, his sugar level had dropped. And one of the signs of it is for him to talk about things that aren't there, incoherently, mumbled speech, a lot of things that go with it. And then we have to do the same thing in mental health. We have to understand the diagnosis a little more than just the reactions and the symptoms.
You know, I remember we were talking. I've been so blessed, and sometimes I didn't realize it until later. I really can't say that I've ever been depressed. I have no concept of depression when I hear people talk about it. It doesn't mean I haven't gotten pissed or haven't gotten sad or upset about it. I think it's like this whole concept of just being mired in that has never ever, it's never been a part of my life.
Okay.
And I was telling you, I didn't realize what I was doing And so like when I start to go down, because I can go to a dark place, but when I start to go to that dark place, I see it, automatically I switch my focus.
Okay.
And I never identified it. I say maybe within the last year or so, I kind of like understood what I was doing.
Okay. You're almost allowing me to coin the phrase that a mental health disorder can be described as someone who inappropriately processes information. You're not doing that. You're not doing that. You have the ability to process information accurately or appropriately and turn and go in another direction. The person who has a mental health disorder doesn't have that capability. That's what we have to get in our minds. They don't have the same processing going on that the normal person would use to get out of the dark hole. They go down in the dark hole and say, wow, it feels safe down here. It feels comfortable down here. And they'll stay there because they don't see what you see. They don't see dark. They see safe, comfort. They see quiet. They see separated from. So when they process it, it doesn't seem as bad to them. I actually had I used to do in-home therapy, and I had a youth that they had labeled depression. They gave him a diagnosis of depression. And he was just he had a flat affect. He wouldn't smile and laugh at everything, but he had the ability to smile and laugh and do things. But then one day, his mother came to a table where we were sitting, and I said, do you love your son? And she said, yes, I love my son. And I said, well, tell me a little bit about him. And she said, he's a good kid, and he does all the right things, he's good in school, and I really love my son. So she walked away. So I asked him, I said, what did you hear your mother say? He said, I know what she just did. She always compliments me when she's mad at me. Rather than to hit me, she tries to say good things about me. So he processes everything she says through a filter that she has some kind of ulterior motive in every word she says. That's his depression. His depression is the inability to hear compliment or derogatory the way it's meant. He always hears it as though you got something else you meant to say. You have something else you were gonna say, but you said that to kind of appease me. So you have to remember that depression doesn't mean this person walking around totally sad, can't talk, can't do nothing. Sometimes it's a person who just is not believing that the world is a good place, not believing that they're worth anything. It doesn't always have a somber. It just could be a disconnect with the way they hear and process information.
Wow. Well, now, what if you're in that house and you're that family member, the friend, church work, and you see this person is going through this, and you can't, what can you do to get them to say, hey, listen, hey, Dan, Bob, Bill, whatever, Mary, Jane, whatever, listen, you need to get this checked out. What can you do, and can you make them do anything? What can you do? Especially if they don't want to acknowledge it. Because that can happen too, where people, something's wrong, you can put your hand on it, but they don't want to acknowledge it.
The easiest answer for that, even though there is no easy answer for that, is if the person and you have enough connectivity that you can get them the idea that, you'd like them to see someone, you may have to go with them the first time. You may have to, I was talking to somebody today that said, you might have to walk them to the first one.
Okay.
And allow them to see that your support is genuine. Like, don't send me to the crazy guy and you don't go. Like, you may have to go a step further. If it's someone you care about, you really truly care about them, you may have to walk them to the door the first time. Then you have to pick a therapist that is able to connect with them as well. And that's probably your easiest challenge. Now, they have a bunch of resources. Most hospitals have some kind of mental health component to it. They have some kind of human resources or some kind of mental health agency that will take like someone and start the process of evaluation.
Mhm.
But when you're saying that someone will not admit it, that's challenging because the conversation that you have with them, you have to be kind of skilled at it, and most people aren't, to be able to point out what you're seeing, what it is that you are bothered by. Like whether it's they're slubbing that's not getting dressed properly, washing and hygiene stuff, angry outbursts, they're responding angrily over everything. Like, you know, you may have to be able to, but now they offer an in-home therapy. That's another thing that's happening a little more than before. So I don't think there's a set way to get somebody to admit it or get somebody to go get help that would be fitting for everyone. It will probably be situational. You'd have to talk with the person, and depending on the severity of the issue, would be your challenge. If they don't see anything wrong with it, it will probably be hard pressed to make them go see someone. But if it's blatant, you know, like if they're breaking up the house, you know, breaking the doors, breaking the windows, or, you know, having, like I said, angry outbursts, or having some kind of stay in their room day in and day out, you know, those kind of things you may be able to talk to somebody and reach out to a friend and reach out and see if somebody else knows somebody that could possibly come and help you with the first part of it, which is getting the person to the proper resources.
What about this? Do you ever get cured from mental illness, or is it something that you manage?
Once again, they have a thing called remission. If you look at it the same way you look at a cancer, you can have it in remission. It can be gone, but it can reoccur. Especially if it's genuine, if it's true biological, chemical imbalances, it can be in remission. It can be symptoms alleviated. But if the symptoms are alleviated because of something you're taking, if you should stop taking that, it may reoccur.
So in other words, you're saying, that goes back to the point, you were saying that, hey listen, I was having these symptoms, I was doing this, I was doing that, and now I got the medication, I feel a lot better, I'm not doing this or doing that, I'm good, that's the end of that, and boom.
And remember, we're talking about someone who inappropriately processes information. So now, because I don't have any symptoms, I believe that I'm fine. That was the challenge. But if the therapist is careful, the therapist will tell you, if you should start feeling better, do not stop taking the medication. See, that's why I said the therapy and the pharmaceuticals have to go hand in hand. You cannot let them think that. You can't let them think that symptom relief is cure. You have to process that with them. You have to say, after maybe 2 or 3 months of taking this medication, you're going to start feeling better. I talked to a friend yesterday, and she said something to me. She said, I was telling her I was going to come and do this with you. She said, I really would like to hear that conversation. She said, because what I've learned about my mental health disorder is that I do that. I start feeling better, and I stop taking the medication. But she also said, I noticed something else, that when I'm using drugs and taking the medication, it doesn't work as effective.
Okay. Which we're going to get into that.
I know we should. You should segue over into that monster called addiction. But we've made some really good strides. I think just picking a good therapist, picking a good psychiatrist, and actually combining the therapy with the medication is the utmost importance.
Now, we're going to get into the connection with addiction, but I had like 1 or 2 other questions.
Okay.
Some people who have mental illness and they tell you, or you can see it, you talk about
Severe.
mild, moderate, and severe. But then, what about the person who seems all right, and then goes to the job and shoots up the place, or jumps off a building, or they just got off the phone with somebody and they said, you know, I just talked to her and she seemed fine. Then she went and did something like,
Well,
so here it is. What's happening there? Why did I miss it?
when you first start talking, like you're talking now,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing came to mind for me was that you have to remember that the person that has the disorder can be just experiencing it. They don't have to have had it 100 years or had it for a long time. They could have started feeling this way and it overwhelmed them. It could be onset. It could be onset. They could be gained, like I told you that there are some things that happen in adulthood that are not happening in childhood. So if I'm 18, 21, and all of a sudden I start feeling this depressed feeling that could push me to suicide, for me it's brand new. So I don't have the ability to go tell you I feel this. I don't even know where it came from. Its onset surprised even the person who has it. Because I was fine before its onset. I was fine before it started. But it may come on and be very strong. I mentioned to you about anxiety and panic attacks.
Mm-hmm.
When people have those attacks, they've talked to me and said, there was nothing going on. There was no reason for me to feel any outside thing, but I just start panicking. So all of the other personality disorders may have that same component, the ability to start its onset and overwhelm the person, because I've never felt this feeling before. So it may go from 0 to 60 at onset, and the person may experience some kind of extreme, where we thinking that everybody that has some mental health disorder has had it their whole lifetime, and you know they progressed and got worse and got worse and got worse. No, it may start out at 30 years old.
And they were fine at that point.
And they were fine up until that point.
And there's no reason to suspect that this is the last time you're going to talk to that person. That person's going to do something
Exactly,
out of line
because
and end up with
it didn't fit into the character of the person, because when you start talking, I'm saying, wow, we sometimes think that people have had this thing for a long time, and then it explodes.
Right.
Where we might be missing that its onset may start at 30 years old, and now I'm starting to feel all of these feelings, and I'm starting to think all these thoughts that I've never thought before, and really not have the time or the ability to get to someone to say something about it. So its onset may be, you know, what we are seeing when we see somebody go from the guy that you were working next to yesterday to the guy who comes in and shoots up the place. You know, maybe it triggered in that emotional space where he was angry, anger went to rage went to performing an act, and you may not be able to say that that person had it all the time. It may not have been sitting there dormant. It may be onset right there. Just something to think about.
Let's talk about addiction. Okay, sorry. A lot of people who have mental illness also have an addiction problem. Is that the case?
Yes, we've come to terms with that they are co-occurring. They can occur simultaneously, yes.
Okay, all right. Now, first question. All right. Can addiction or use of drugs trigger mental illness? And the second part of it, and or cause it?
The answer is probably going to be yes, because the chemicals you use to get intoxicated increase the production of chemicals that you normally made, or decreases chemicals that you normally made. Like, they have some things that happen to people when they're using, and then when they come down from the drug that they took, they become depressed because there's no longer that feeling. So it can unbalance you chemically, yes, it can. So I don't know if you can say cause, but I think you can say correlate. I think you can say they can trigger. Because sometimes a cocaine-induced psychosis can cause paranoia. It can cause you to be afraid. Now, the cocaine wears off, you still afraid. So it may be induced by the ingestion of the substance, or it may linger after the substance is out of your system. So yeah, I don't know if I'd say cause, but I think the word is exacerbate. It can make it increase.
Okay. In the people that you work with, do you see addiction and mental illness going hand in hand? Let's say out of 100% of the cases, is it, first of all, does it happen? Is it 20% of the time? Is it 50% of the time? Is it, what would you say?
From what I've experienced, I go to 75-80% of the time they're together. There's a combination of the two. Another one that comes to mind right now is when a young man or a young lady uses young, their brain hasn't fully developed, it hasn't finished developing, so it can cause deficits and deficiencies in areas of learning that they normally would have surpassed without the drugs in their system. So now we got this kid who is hyper, but it's because he was using so young that his emotional maturity didn't happen in sequential pattern like it normally would. So he's taken on a new characteristic, like I told you about traits of someone who is agitated and irritated, but it's because he's not using any drugs. I've had people say to me, when I get high, it calms me down. So if I'm not high, I'm irritable. So you can cause yourself an imbalance by putting in chemicals too young. Now, an adult that's using a substance can, there's another piece I gotta go backwards. You got genetics in family history. Family could have some mental illness traits that carry over to the children. Start using drugs, that thing that was laying there dormant could be agitated, and now it's revealing itself. So you don't really have any kind of, the question one time in the field that I'm in was, what came first, the mental illness or the drugs?
Okay.
And we got caught there for a minute. We were like, okay, did this person have the mental illness and then the drugs made it bigger, or did they do the drugs and cause it? So that conversation is still being had. Like, what was first? Was there a mental illness there, the drugs made it come out, or was there the drugs and the drugs caused the mental illness? So that conversation is still ongoing. No, we have some evidence-based stuff that proves that they go hand in hand. We call it, I think they started naming it. One of the names they used to do was MICA, mentally ill and chemically addicted. So they kind of tied it together, because after a while they found out that you could treat the wrong thing.
So
someone with a mental illness, if you just give them drug treatment, when the drugs are out of the system and this mental illness surfaces, You're sitting there going, wow, I thought this person was getting better, but their mental illness is starting to increase in intensity. Vice versa. You have someone who comes in, you think you're treating them for mental illness, and it's really triggered by their using. Every time they use, they go to the hospital. Every time they use, they start seeing things. They start hearing voices. So it could be interchangeable.
Wow. You know, what would you say, let's say if you're that person who maybe has a situation, or maybe you're that family member, what do you see as the biggest obstacles to getting treatment, to getting things, say, managed?
I don't know what the biggest one is, but the one that I see them a lot is admitting that it's there. Like actually believing that there is an issue. Because, see, the human mind doesn't want to be crazy. It doesn't want to be crazy. It always tries to validate sanity by saying, no, I'm not. I don't have that. I don't have that. So people spend a lot of time deflecting it and denying it. Now, we talked earlier, we got to the place where you said, well, as a family member, how do you help them admit it? How do you help them see it? How do you help them get the help? That's the challenge, because it's not you. With it not being you, they have to kind of some way realize or get so uncomfortable with their actions that they know that they need some help too. Because the human mind is always going to protect itself from being crazy. So it will defend anything that sounds like crazy. People even use the phrase, I'm not crazy, because they're trying to say, I'm not off balance. I'm not off balance mentally. It's a real stigma with mental imbalance. We fight so hard to not have it. But the world is so full of different stressors that we seeing it more now. We have the extra stress, we have the trauma, we have raising children. Raising children was never easy. But now it's the, do I beat them? Do I not? Do I talk bad to them? Do I compliment them? I have a program that we were learning at the agency called Nurture Heart. And we always tried to find the good in the kid, and we were taught that you never, when a kid is doing something wrong, you never address it right there where the wrong is. You wait until he's in a better place, and you talk to him in a better place so he can hear you. Like, there's all kinds of theories out there now to try to not accept mental as a problem. And you know, just having this conversation, that it is one of our many problems now, but it's still unacceptable. When I was a kid, they used to have this place called Greystone, and we used to think everybody in Greystone was crazy, like crazy, right. Like unpredictable, unmanageable, and they need to be locked in a ward, and that's what we thought crazy meant. And I think we still live in that kind of mindset, that there's no such thing as a mild, there's always severe.
Okay.
We always look for severe. And if it's not severe, we might try to say it's not there. But mild can be just as debilitating. A mild disorder can be just as debilitating. Social phobias, where I don't want to go outside, I don't want to be around other people. Those kind of phobias can keep you friendless. You know what I mean? Able to produce at work, but maybe go home and crawl up in the bed. Exactly. So we're still dealing with the stigma.
You know, I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you, and I'm saying to myself, you know, a lot of things that I think that most people take for granted, for a person who is struggling with this, don't take it for granted. Or we might take it for granted that, listen, I understand, listen, I said I thought it was clear, and you're not clear. We're processing different, what do I need to be paying attention to? This is the last part of the question here. Like, 'cause I'm really, really trying to get you to tell me, tomorrow when I wake up, tomorrow when I interact with Billy Bob or Mary Lou, this is how you have to process. Like, if I express anger, let's say I'm not happy with the job, I'm not happy with how this interaction went. And now a lot of people will shoot first, ask questions later. You're driving along and someone cuts you off, and you sometimes you can go into berserk mode. Do you have to remain calm in life? You have to constantly be vigilant. I mean, how do you live a normal life, so to speak, when you're processing in your mind okay, and people around you may not be processing? How do you let that know?
There was a song out they say people make the world go round.
Right.
And what they were trying to say about that in that song, I gathered that they were trying to say that there's all different kinds of people. So for you to categorize it into a place where you can understand it fully is impossible. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
There are some traits that may present themselves. The conversation someone may be saying, they may be talking about, I want to kill myself, or they may say, I'm going to start packing up my stuff right now. You know, this is over for me. Like they may present some signs or symptoms that may alert you that there's something wrong more than the normal. Mm-hmm. But to put it in a place where you could always be on point, you know, the mass murders that shoot up the schools or shoot up a church or whatever, it's really not that salient. It's not that easily put into a category. Because, like I said, even tonight, sitting here talking with you, I kind of stretch myself. The onset of it may be the completion of the act. Mm-hmm. Like the person may think of killing themselves and kill themselves. Mm-hmm. They may not think of it, talk to you about it, process it, go to work the next day. They may think of it and carry it out. And that's the piece that you can't put any kind of reins on. You can't put any kind of grips on that, because the person going through it is not thinking the way we think. So it'll look abnormal to you what happened to them because of the way that they're processing, because of the way they're thinking. It won't look normal. I saw him yesterday, he was fine. Mm-hmm. Now he's not here. But he's not here because he saw a reason to not be here, took it seriously enough to not be here, and carried out his act. Most of the time, the simple question, and I learned this in a hospital ward. One of my young relatives had an anxiety attack, and they took him to the hospital. And I was in earshot of the doctor. Mm-hmm. And now that I've been doing this a little while, I have the same information that this doctor had. When my young nephew came up there, the doctor said, so you feel like hurting yourself? He said, yes. He said, do you even feel like maybe killing yourself? He said, yes. He said, do you have a plan? Mm. And when he said no to not having a plan, the doctor said, okay, you talked a little more, and then he let us take him home. Mm-hmm. But he said to me, if the person tells you that they have a plan, that's a danger. Without a plan, it might not be as intense. It may not be as important to buy into the I want to kill myself. But if he says, I want to kill myself, and I got a gun home, that's the one you take serious. I want to kill myself. Well, do you have a plan? Yeah, I was going to drink some bleach. Or I was going to do something. When they can tell you the next step in the suicide thinking, that's when you kind of give it some credibility.
Now, they may not want to kill themselves. They may have other things that they want to do. Mm-hmm. So, let me see if I'm understanding this correctly. So, it doesn't have to be that severe, but it could be, I'm going to do something that's really, like, let's say, maybe not normal, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And again, would I be incorrect in saying well, how you going to do it? Now, they can tell me how they're going to do it, then now I'm going to take that person seriously.
You should call 911. You should try to get somebody there from the crisis unit. Suicide has dimensions as well.
But let's not even suicide.
It has dimensions.
Okay.
It has dimensions. There is a person who will take a lot of pills, calling it suicide, when they know you can get them to the hospital and pump their stomach.
Okay.
There's a situation that I know about. The lady said she tied her husband's tie around the doorknob and slammed the door in his face, hoping he would jerk the door open and choke her, so she could blame it on him. She could blame her death on him. He'd have to live his life knowing he killed his wife. So there are times when the suicide attempt is to get you involved in their pain. They're trying to get you to understand how much they're hurting. It's not necessarily always, they're not always, you have to check and see if they had a way to get, did they have a way out?
An exit plan.
Yes, did they have a way out? Did they dial 911 and then take the pills?
Okay.
Or did they call you and then take the pills? Like, did they leave themselves a way out? Is a part of, understanding suicide as well. So, a lot of people, I'm stuck right now because a lot of people don't have the wherewithal to admit to struggling mentally. We just have a rough time doing that because we always want to keep a good image. We always want to keep a good face. So we may be feeling some feelings that we know are out of the ordinary and afraid to tell someone. You know what I mean? So,
but it also, but the challenge is, I just want to just share a couple other things as we get down to the wire. Post-traumatic stress can be an issue. That understand. Money can trigger things in you, like a lack of money, relationships or losses in relationships or breakups and things of that nature, jobs, just things that didn't go right can all be triggers.
well, once again, those are normal stressors.
Okay.
We all kind of deal with those things on a daily. If someone has a disorder that interrupts their ability to process those normal stressors, that can cause them to respond differently than the normal person would respond. That's a beginning of what we might call the mild portion of the disorder that they have. When they respond to, they're responding to the stressors. That's why I told you about conduct disorder, adjustment disorder. Can I adjust to life's stressors? Can I adjust to those things? And a lot of times, the normal person, or the person that we quote unquote call normal, responds and they get through it. They have a lady who did this thing called the 5 stages of grief, because she learned that grieving was a process, and she gave some stages that you go through in grief that revolutionized grief, because people now know that there's denial, there's anger, there's bargaining, then there's depression, and then there's acceptance. So in those 5 stages, you're able to process your grief. There are some people who don't know that try to process their grief, and the denial of the person dying goes into the anger. Why did you leave me? And they can get stuck there. Like, my mother just left me, and now I'm here all by myself in the world. And they start processing right there and stay right there, and that could cause them to have some extra response to the same thing somebody else went through by losing a loved one or losing a baby. So it has a lot to do with just knowing the person that you're talking to, being able to ask them some simple questions, but I don't want you to practice outside of your school. I don't want you
Right.
to try to be the doctor and try to be the, the social worker or try to be the clinician. Just if you believe that there's a prevalent, it's there continually, maybe you can try to get someone to come to them or them to go to someone. If you see it and it's prevalent, it's there consistently, you might want to try to get them to someone or try to get someone to come to them and have that first initial talk with them that knows what they're talking about.
We're right down to the wire here.
Okay.
Where can people get help if they need help? Any organizations or any other?
I really think that most hospitals provide mental health services. I know that St. Clair's does. I know that University of Medicine and Dentistry does. I know that St. Joe's does. Like there's usually a mental health component, especially now. In most hospitals, you can start there and find direction. Then there's online stuff you can Google and look up mental health services near you or in your area. If someone is in an episode that they're having it right then and there, always call 911. Take a chance of having them assessed and released than to take a chance of not doing it and having them hurt themselves.
Now, any final thoughts? Or anything you want to emphasize?
I'm glad that we had this conversation. I don't consider myself an expert, so if we've left anything out or if I've offended some scholars that are smarter than me and know more than me, or if I said crazy too many times and the politically correct term is something different, I'm willing to accept that tonight. I think we just broached the conversation. We talked about it from a couple of different angles. And once again, I think if you have someone in your family or a family member or a friend who you see a consistent abnormality or consistent off key, if you can't get them to go, maybe you can have someone come talk with them that knows what they're doing. But other than that, I think we really kind of touched on some things that people need to hear.
Okay, if people want to contact your organization or how the other countries, how they do it?
Well, my email is firststepclinical@gmail.com. I definitely believe that if we're not going to be a source that you use, we can refer you to someone that may have more. So once again, it's firststepclinical@gmail.com, and we deal with mental health, we deal with couples therapy, we deal with individual therapy, we do drug and alcohol counseling, and one of my daughters and I are trying to get into consulting. So we kind of trying to expand ourselves and reach as many people as we can, because this is not going to go away. And I like when me and you talk, you keep telling me that the family suffers, family struggles. And I think there needs to be more conversations about what the family members can look for, what the family members can do. And I think it's educate yourself. If you have a family member who has a diagnosis or you believe there's something wrong and you got an idea what it might be, just kind of educate yourself. If your child has ADHD, don't think you know what ADHD is. Oh, I know what he has ADHD. Okay, well, what is that? And I think that's where I would put the period at. Always try to educate yourself before you start dealing with it. All right?
Well, Mr. Bell, thank you so much
Always
for
a
taking
pleasure.
time.
Always a pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank you for coming out and hanging out. Hopefully we shared some information that you can use. Obviously, this is not the place where we diagnose things, but we can have the conversation about it. Also, too, Mr. Bell is a resource for you, and either if it's something that he doesn't directly do, he can direct you to people who can help you specifically. All right. Well, anyway, as I said in the beginning, on Soulful House Nation, although it's driven by the music, I mean, if we keep it real, we have other things going on in our community. And I just want to take a minute to share our conversation with you. And I want you to continue to look for ways to improve, and also too, we have issues in our community, let's have discussions about it, and let's get to answers. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just gonna actually do a couple of things. Number one is to check out our show every Monday. This week we got a special guest, John Jackson, who's the manager of Aaron K. Gray. We're gonna see if we can get him to reveal some secrets. I don't know about that, but anyway. Also too, right after that we do the Shazam Free Zone. The Shazam Free Zone, what we do is we play new music. You don't have to look it up. You don't have to Shazam it. We tell you what it is, and also too, we're going to introduce some more new tracks. Finally, we do have our fan page and our group page. That's Soulful House Nation. That's Soulful House Nation group. I'm going to ask everybody to join that, but when you join, we have 2 questions that we need you to answer. Number 1, how did you hear about us? And also, too, are you a dancer, listener? Doesn't matter, but just want to know what your connection to Soulful House music is. We also have a website, www.soulfulhousenation.com. Sign up for that. And now we've got our YouTube channel up and running. That's Soulful House Nation. So, again, Soulful House Nation, our community, we're going to have different topics and things that go on in our community besides just the music. And I hope this is a benefit to you. All right, my name is DJ Dan with Soulful House Nation. Get ready, get ready, get ready.